Śrī Gurubhyo Namaḥ. Namaste, dear viewers. Welcome to this episode of Tantrādhva Conversations. In Tantrādhva Conversations, we explore the grand and profound path of Tantra with esteemed guests who are acharyas, upasakas, and scholars of Bharat's Tantra Parampara. For this episode, I am thrilled to introduce Dr. Giridharan Ur, a remarkable traditional scholar and spiritual guide. Born in a remote village near Madurai, Tamil Nadu, Dr. Giridharan's journey has been truly inspiring. While he has had a successful banking career across India, his spiritual and scholarly pursuits are equally commendable. He is a Samskritam scholar with an MA and PhD from Mysore University and a Śrīvidya Guru illuminating and preserving the sacred Śrīvidya Parampara. His doctoral thesis on the encyclopedic value of Śrī Lalitā Sahasranāma is a testament to his deep study and devotion. Initiated into Śrīvidyopāsanā in the Samayācāra tradition in 1981, Dr. Giridharan, along with his wife, has received Pūrṇa Dīkṣā and continues to guide spiritual aspirants on this spiritual path. Beyond his profound scholarship and spiritual practice, he is a gifted poet in the ancient Tamizh and Samskritam meters and a passionate connoisseur of Rabindra Sangeet, having mastered over 250 songs. He has a YouTube channel by the name Giridharan U.R, where he shares insightful lectures on Śrīvidya, Advaita Vedanta, and Tantric concepts, along with travelogues and poetry in Malayalam, Tamil, and English. In recognition of his outstanding efforts to the field of Śrīvidya Śāstra Pracharana, he has been conferred with the title of Shrividya Jnana Sagaram by Sri Maha Panchamukha Pratyangara Veda Dharmakshetra Trust. In this episode, we have the unique privilege of exploring with him the mysteries of Tantra, the Tantric paradigm, and the Śrīvidya tradition, drawing from his rich blend of scholarship, practice, and lived experience. This is a pre-recorded asynchronous conversation, so it is presented in a question and answer format rather than a raw, unfiltered discussion. Dr. Giridharan's responses to our questions are deeply rooted in his knowledge of the Shastras and has been carefully crafted to ensure that we gain as much knowledge as possible from each question. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Now on to the episode. Namaste, sir. Welcome to Tantrādhva Conversations. It's an absolute pleasure to have you in this episode. So I want to start from the very foundations. What is Tantra? And why is it so difficult to understand Tantra today? And about yourself, are you a practitioner of Tantra?
Śrī Gurubhyo Namaḥ. Namaste. Thank you for the kind introduction. Coming to your question, honestly, I don't know if I can give a precise, all-inclusive answer to the question, what is Tantra? Anyway, I shall try to describe in a very short way what I have understood about Tantra in general. But first of all, it is important to recognize that Tantra has long been misrepresented as something dangerous, corrupt, or exotic. Many people picture a Tantric as a mysterious sorcerer, if not someone caught up in strange and excessive orgiastic rituals. This is an image that predates even British rule in India, and this misconception has been widespread and deeply influential also. However, a significant shift occurred in the early 20th century thanks to the famous author Sir John Woodroffe, who wrote both under his own name and the pseudonym Arthur Avalon. Through his extensive study and publication of Tantric texts, he boldly presented their sophistication to the world dispelling many myths and misconceptions. His work not only introduced Tantra's richness to the West, but also helped revive its appreciation within India itself. These perspectives are crucial and we should keep them in mind. Now, Tantra is not a singular or uniform tradition, but a vast and intricate system encompassing multiple strands of esoteric knowledge, philosophy, and ritual practice. It is a kind of deeply transformative spiritual path aimed at awakening inner energy and realizing the divine. It focuses on direct experience over intellectual study. Tantra employs various techniques such as mantras, yantras, and specific sadhana practices, all of which are traditionally imparted only through direct initiation from a qualified guru to a dedicated disciple. It is called Dīkṣā, and this Dīkṣā or initiation is not merely symbolic but serves as an essential transmission of spiritual power and wisdom, enabling the disciple who is going to be the practitioner to access deeper dimensions of the practice. Historically, Tantra played a significant role in shaping spiritual traditions across the Indian subcontinent. It was regarded as sacred and often kept secret to prevent misuse. However, with changing times, the authentic transmission of this knowledge gradually declined. Even as recently as the 19th century, Tantra was still practiced in certain lineages, but in the modern era, it has been largely misunderstood, reduced to superstition, or distorted through misleading interpretations. Actually, misleading interpretations is the right way to describe how Tantra has been misrepresented in a modern era. Many such distortions have deprived it of its profound spiritual and philosophical depth. Popular culture frequently misconstrues Tantra, depicting it either as an esoteric mystery or, worse, as a tool for fulfilling materialistic and self-indulgent desires and thereby eroding its true spiritual essence. Because of this, understanding Tantra in the right way and recognizing its value has become quite challenging. Today, most people, not scholars but general readers, only receive a fragmented or superficial idea or surface level understanding, which often leads to misconceptions and even harsh criticism. That is exactly what happens when the knowledge one receives is incomplete, right? However, in more recent times, both Indian and Western scholars have further explored many tantric texts, shedding light on their profound philosophical depth and non-dual perspective. Kashmir Shaivism, which grew out of the Shaiva Tantras, is gaining more attention today, probably because of how subtly and how uniquely it presents the Advaita principle. But most of these scholarly works remain within academic circles or among serious students of Tantra. For the general public, however, the old misconceptions still persist, and quite strongly in many cases. Coming to the last part of your question, whether I am a practitioner of Tantra, I should say yes, because I am a Śrīvidyopāsaka. And Śrīvidyopāsanā is essentially a practice of mantra japa. Now, mantra sadhana itself is a part of Tantra. Generally, when people think of Tantra, they associate it with different forms of worship and rituals through mantra, yantra, mudras, and so on. Basically, that is how it is understood, right? So, as someone who follows mantra sadhana, I can definitely say that I am a practitioner of Tantra. There is no doubt about that. But still, I would prefer to call myself simply as a practitioner of mantra japa sadhana. Because to say I am a Tantrika has an entirely different, perhaps even an exceptional meaning today because of the general misconceptions people have. I just now mentioned about that.
Based on your understanding, sir, how would you define Tantra?
Well, if you ask me how I would define Tantra, I can only refer to one of the many definitions that already exist. The word Tantra comes from the Sanskrit root tan, which means to stretch, to expand or extend. What really does Tantra expand? A well-known definition of Tantra comes from the Kamika Agama. Of course, many Tantric texts provide definitions, but let me take guidance from this Kamika Agama quote. Tanoti vipulan arthan tattva mantra samanvitan tranam cha kurute yasmat tantramityabhidhiyate. Which means, Tantra expands profound knowledge. Tanoti vipulan arthan. That is interwoven with tattva and mantra. Tattva are the essential truths and mantras are the sacred sounds. Tattva, mantra, samanvitan, and it also provides protection and guidance. Tranam cha kurute. So, Tantra expands profound knowledge that is not just theoretical but deeply experiential. It reveals essential truths about existence, consciousness, and the interplay of energy and awareness. These truths, tattva, I think form the foundation of Tantra, helping the seeker understand the deeper reality beyond the physical world. And this expansion is not just limited to intellectual understanding alone. Tantra is interwoven with mantra, tattva mantra samanvita, sacred vibrations that refine and elevate consciousness. Through mantras, one aligns with cosmic energies, awakens dormant potentials, and deepens spiritual awareness. Mantra Vibhaga is an essential framework within Tantra. The classification and systematic arrangement of mantras provide a structured approach to understanding and applying them according to their purpose, potency, and connection to specific deities or cosmic forces. This meticulous organization allows sadhakas, that is, practitioners, to harness mantras effectively for spiritual growth, inner transformation, and alignment with divine energies. This is a great contribution of Tantras. And at the same time, Tantra is not just about knowledge and experience, it also offers protection and guidance. Tranam cha kurute. It provides methods to overcome obstacles, dispel negativity, and navigate the spiritual path safely. Whether through rituals, meditation, or inner discipline, Tantra empowers the seeker, ensuring both inner growth and external harmony. So, when we say Tantra expands, we mean it stretches the boundaries of perception, deepens wisdom, and elevates consciousness, all while safeguarding the practitioner's journey. Tanoti vipulan arthan tattva mantra samanvitan tranam cha kurute yasmat tantramityabhidhiyate. I think this is the best definition of Tantra, a most appropriate, authentic, and profound definition given by an ancient Tantric text itself.
So, is Tantra just a ritualistic practice, or are there other aspects to it?
Tantra is much more than just a ritualistic practice. While external rituals do play a significant role, Tantra is a comprehensive spiritual system that encompasses philosophy, meditation, mantras, visualization, energy work, and deep inner transformation. We can say that Tantra at its core is about experiencing the divine within and without. It teaches that everything in existence is sacred and that spiritual realization is possible through the body, mind, and senses rather than rejecting them. There are two main aspects of Tantra, outer and inner aspects, Bahirangatva and Antarangatva. Karmakanda Rupam Tantrasya Bahirangatvam Antarangatvam Atmabodha Pradhanam. That is, the outer aspect of Tantra is in the form of ritual practices, and the inner aspect is primarily about self-realization. Outer aspect or Bahiranga Tantra includes all kinds of rituals, yantra worship, puja, using hand gestures called mudra, homa, that is fire sacrifices, and similar structured ceremonies. These help channel divine energies and create a conducive atmosphere for spiritual growth. Inner aspect or Antaranga Tantra focuses on sadhana through mantras, meditation, pranayama, many kinds of nyasas, the Adhara chakras, Kundalini awakening, and ultimately the realization of one's identity with the Supreme Consciousness. Different traditions of Tantra, such as Shakta, Shaiva, Pancharatra, and so on, place emphasis on different aspects, but all aim at transcendence through experience. Anubhavena atitantata, that is the state of going beyond. So, the true purpose of Tantra as it existed and evolved in its early phase extends far beyond mere rituals. It is a profound path of self-discovery, an intricate science of energy mastery, and a means to attain divine union. Rooted in deep spiritual wisdom, Tantra offers a transformative journey that harmonizes the physical and transcendental, guiding the seeker towards an intimate experience of the sacred. It is not merely a system of external practices, but an inward unfolding where consciousness is refined, energies are awakened, and the individual aligns with the cosmic rhythm of experience. All the outward peculiarities, exaggerated portrayals, or misconceptions surrounding Tantra hold no real significance. The earnest aspirant remains undisturbed by the societal opinions or judgments, for his focus is solely on his inner transformation. He understands that true spiritual progress is not measured by external perceptions, but by the depth of his own realization. Unconcerned with how the world views his path, he moves forward with unwavering dedication, seeking only the upliftment of his consciousness and the unfolding of the divine within. There is a famous quote which beautifully conveys how a true Tantrika is unaffected by the views of the society or its misconceptions, and how he remains inwardly steadfast in his pursuit of spiritual realization. I don't remember from which Tantra, maybe Kularnava Tantra. Lokavat bhramate yastu lokacha vimukha sada tantra marga ratah shashvat tam vai siddhim nikachati. It means He who moves about like an ordinary man yet remains ever detached from worldly concerns, deeply absorbed in the path of Tantra, such a one surely attains perfection. But of course, this was in a different time, when Tantra was in its glory, when the path was respected and understood in its true essence. Today things are different. Misconceptions have grown and the original wisdom has often been overshadowed. Yet for the true seeker, the essence remains unchanged. It is still a path of deep transformation beyond the noise of society.
What is the nature of Tantra according to the Shastras? And could you explain a little bit about how it goes beyond a mere ritualistic practice?
Okay, I shall try to classify the different sides of Tantra so that its true nature can be understood. Tantram nama param jnanam mokshamarga pradarshakam sarva shastreshu guhyatvam tat swarupam durasadam. This verse is from Kamika Tantra, which means Tantra is supreme knowledge, jnana, param jnanam, that shows the path to liberation. Moksha marga pradarshakam. Among all scriptures, it is the most secret and its true nature is difficult to grasp. Tat swarupam durasadam. Sarva shastreshu guhyatvam tat swarupam durasadam. So this clearly establishes that Tantra is not just about rituals, but the spiritual wisdom it imparts shows the path to moksha, that is liberation. Rudrayamala Tantra says that Tantra is also the essence of all scriptures. Tantranam paramo guhyo devinam jnanarupakah shaktiswarupam vijneyam shastranam uttamam matam. That is, Tantra is the highest secret embodying the wisdom of the Divine Mother. It is Shakti Swarupam, the very form of Shakti, and is considered as the supreme amongst all scriptures. So this highlights that Tantra is the essence of spiritual wisdom intimately connected with Shakti rather than merely external practices. And thirdly, Tantra is both ritual and inner experience. Tantram nama dvayam proktam kriyajnana samanvitam kriyayuktam avapnoti jnanahino namuchyate. Meaning, Tantra is said to be of two kinds. One that involves both action, that is kriya, and knowledge, jnana. The one who engages in action attains success, but without knowledge there is no liberation. This directly affirms that Tantra is a combination of ritual, that is kriya, and inner wisdom, jnana, not just an external practice alone. And finally, it is said that Tantra is the direct path to the divine. Tantrat shastrani jatani tantrat sarvam pravartade tantramevottamam jneyam tattva artha jnana dayakam. That is, from Tantra all scriptures have arisen, and from Tantra everything comes into being. Tantra alone is supreme, for it grants knowledge of the ultimate truth. This declares Tantra as the source of all spiritual wisdom, showing its primacy over mere ritualistic practices. Therefore, we can say that Tantra is a path of supreme knowledge and liberation, param jnanam mokshamarga pradarshakam, a system that unites ritual with wisdom, kriya jnana samanvitam, the root of all scriptural teachings, tantrat sarvam pravartade, and it is a way to directly experience the divine. This is how the scriptures describe the true nature of Tantra.
What is the position of Tantra vis-a-vis the Veda?
Tantric texts are also known as Agamas. The word Agama means that which has come down. In other words, something that has been transmitted through tradition in an authoritative manner. A prefix meaning towards or arrival. Gam, a root verb or dhatu meaning to go or to come. So Agama literally means that which has come to us, that which has been handed down, referring to knowledge, teachings or scriptures that have been transmitted through tradition. We can call it inductive experience through tradition. And where does this transmission originate from? It is said to come from Sri Parameshwara, Lord Shiva himself. Adrishta vigrahat shantat shivat paramakaranat dhvanirupam vinishkrantam shastram paramadurlabham. This means this Agama Shastra has emerged in sound form from the great Lord Sri Parameshwara, who is invisible, tranquil and the supreme cause. There is a verse that describes the transmission of Agama. Shivena Devya Dattam tu Nandine, Nandina Brahmana Dattam Brahmana Rishi Dattakam, Rishina Manusha Dattam Ityede Agamodbhavam. So, what does this mean? Sri Parameshwara taught it to Sri Parashakti, who then taught it to Nandikeshwara. Nandikeshwara passed it on to Brahma, Brahma to the Rishis, that is sages, and the Rishis then transmitted it to human beings. This is how the Agamas are believed to have originated. Ityede Agamodbhavam. Now, when we look at the Vedas, they are called Nigamas. The term Nigama refers to that which has been concluded or inferred. Nigamanam. Deductive knowledge. Understanding the essence of Vedas requires knowledge of the Vedangas, which are 6 auxiliary disciplines like Siksha, Kalpa, Vyakarana, Nirukta, Chandas and Jyotisha. Siksha is phonetics, Kalpa deals with rituals, Vyakarana is grammar, Nirukta etymology, Chandas is meter and Jyotisha is astronomy or astrology. Since these disciplines help in arriving at the conclusions of the Vedas are known as Nigamas. So we can say that Tantra and Veda are defined using the terms Agama and Nigama. Both, of course, are paths to liberation, Moksha Marga. However, unlike the Vedic path, which is more exclusive and not meant for everyone, Tantra is open to all. According to the original Vedic injunctions, the Samhitas, that is the Vedic hymns, along with their Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads, that is basically the entire Vedic corpus, were not accessible to those who were not born in a Brahmana family. Even though today many non-Brahmanas study Upanishads, if we go strictly by the original Vedic rules, it does not seem like they were meant for everyone. That is how it was traditionally understood, right? The Vedic scriptures and their branches are collectively referred to as Shruti, which means that which is heard. But there is also a statement which says both Vedic and Tantric are 2 classes of Shruti and they are the basis on which Dharma is established. Shruti Pramanako Dharma, Shrutischa Dvividha Vaidiki Tantriki cha. However, by the usage Shruti, what is commonly meant is only Vedas, because they are meant to be listened to, contemplated upon and intellectually grasped. For studying Vedanta or understanding Upanishadic philosophy, one needs advanced knowledge and intellectual maturity. That is why it is not something everyone can simply pick up and understand. But Tantra is entirely different in this regard. Unlike the Vedic system, Tantra does not require any prior intellectual capability or scholarship. Tantra is fundamentally a sadhana shastra, a practical science of spiritual discipline. But it is also possible that Tantra probably evolved and developed as a simplified form of Vedic rites. It is quite likely that the Tantra developed as a more accessible and practical form of Vedic rituals. For example, instead of elaborate Vedic fire rituals, that is yajna, temples emerged as places of worship where everyone had the freedom to offer prayers. Similarly, grand Vedic sacrifices like Ashwamedha, Atiratra or Vajapeya, Agnishtoma and so on might have gradually been replaced by temple rituals and puja practices. At the same time, the chanting of Vedic mantras was probably restructured in a way that retained its scriptural authenticity, while specific tantric mantras and associated deities gained prominence. Over time, Tantra may have incorporated additional practices such as dhyana, that is meditation, pranayama, breath control, and bhavana kriya, that is visualization techniques, making it more integrated spiritual system. And when we talk about Kundalini and yogic disciplines, it is quite possible that in ancient times these were an integral part of Tantric practice itself. The very essence of Tantra, or one of its most important aspects, is its inclusivity. It provides Trananam, that is protection and liberation to all without any discrimination based on caste or gender. Unlike the Vedic path, which has certain restrictions, Tantra is open to everyone, whether they are educated or not, whether they have formal scriptural knowledge or not. That is the big difference. Even those who were traditionally considered ineligible for Vedic studies, such as women and Shudras, have full access to Tantra. It is primarily a system of shikshana or parishilana, a training system. It does not demand intellectual sharpness or scriptural expertise. What it does require, however, is faith, complete faith, unwavering focus, and deep commitment. That is all that truly matters in the path of Tantra. And that is what makes it so unique.
So, do you think the Vedas are actually older than the Tantra?
Not exactly. We can assume that this sacred knowledge existed even before the Vedic period. The Vedas are said to be apaurusheya, not authored by any human. Similarly, according to the Guru Parampara, lineage of teachers in Tantra, the original source of this knowledge is none other than Sri Parameshwara, the Supreme Lord Himself. However, it is quite clear that the Tantra Shastra, also known as the Agama Shastra, was written down in its present form only after the Vedic period. But Tantra doesn't deal with only spiritual practices, right? It covers a vast range of subjects: social and political thought, remedies for various diseases, methods to remove negative influences, including mental disturbances and external afflictions, ways to fulfill desires, and even strategies for overcoming enemies. In this way, Tantra has branched out like a massive tree with numerous subsects and applications. Because of this, Tantra is highly practical and has a vast scope of application. It is an essential branch of knowledge for understanding the core essence of our ancient civilization. Now, here is something interesting. When Vedic yajnas, that is fire rituals, gradually gave way to temple worship, Tantra became the primary religious practice for millions of common people in India. After all, deep philosophical concepts and abstract metaphysical discussions aren't easily accessible to everyone, right? So people found fulfillment in tantric rituals, temple worship, and associated practices. Over time, each village and town in India naturally shaped its social and spiritual life around its local temple. That is why Sir John Woodrow famously observed, "Wherever bells are ringing and lamps are being lit, there you will find the influence of Tantra." From the grandest rituals to the simplest gestures like Anjali Mudra, Tantra permeates our spiritual life in ways we often overlook. So, in essence, Tantra is not something separate from our spiritual tradition. It is deeply ingrained in our practices, rituals, and even in the very way we perceive the universe.
So, earlier you mentioned that being a Śrīvidya Upasaka, you are a mantra japa sadhaka. So, could you explain a little bit about Śrīvidya and what is the significance of the name Śrīvidya?
Śrīvidya or Śrīvidyopāsanā refers to a mode of worship or spiritual practice primarily centered on mantra japa. The term Shri signifies prosperity, greatness, and auspiciousness. The word Vidya can be understood in two ways here. Just as we speak of Atma Vidya or Brahma Vidya, it can refer to a tantric method of spiritual training or a prescribed mode of practice. Mayaācārya vivekena vetti vidyapadam yaya sakala paramatñeya vidya jnana kriyatmika. A Shaiva Tantra, as quoted by the famous Sri Bhaskararaya, states that particular aspect of Kala, a supreme faculty of Shakti, which grants correct knowledge through Mayaācārya viveka, that is, discernment of the aspects of Maya, and which is Jnana Kriyatmika, the nature of both Jnana and Kriya, is called Vidya. This is one meaning. Another meaning is found in Tantric mantra classifications. The mantras of male deities are simply called mantras, whereas the mantras of female deities are termed Vidya. Therefore, the worship of the mantra of the Divine Mother Sri Maha Tripura Sundari is aptly named Śrīvidya. In either sense, Śrīvidya signifies a mantra japa sadhana, a spiritual practice centered around the chanting of mantras. A set of mantras classified as Śrīvidya mantras exist, the foremost being the 15-syllabled Panchadashi and its expanded form Shodashi. These mantras are transmitted through a guru belonging to an unbroken lineage of teachers, Guru Mandali or Guru Sampradaya, in a process known as Dīkṣā, that is initiation. The disciple, upon receiving the mantra, follows the practice of japa under the guidance of the preceptor, his or her preceptor. Thus, in essence, Śrīvidyopāsanā is the worship of the Mother Goddess Sri Maha Tripura Sundari with undeterred and steadfast devotion through mantra japa sadhana. However, Śrīvidya is not limited to mantra japa alone. there is another equally significant aspect, which is worship through Sri Chakra. Sri Chakra, also known as Sri Yantra, is the most revered and intricate sacred geometric representation of the abstract form of Divine Mother, holding a uniquely profound and esoteric significance within the Tantric tradition. It embodies the entire cosmos in its dynamic and static aspects and is venerated as the very form of the Supreme Shakti herself. Every line, triangle or lotus in Sri Chakra pattern carries profound mystical significance, symbolizing different aspects of cosmic evolution and spiritual realization. And so, this worship, when performed externally as Bahya Puja, is conducted through this sacred geometric pattern of Sri Chakra. This divine diagram is worshipped either as a three-dimensional Meru or Mahameru, or in its two-dimensional form drawn or etched on various surfaces. Therefore, we can say that japa of the mantras prescribed in the Śrīvidya tradition and the Aradhana or worship of the Divine Mother through Sri Chakra are the two important aspects of Śrīvidyopāsanā.
How did this Śrīvidya tradition evolve? Can you explain a little bit about that?
Śrī Krama, also known as Tripura Krama, is a Shakta tradition that originated from the Shaiva system, Shaiva Darshana, that was prevalent in the Kashmir Valley. This Śrī Krama or Tripura Krama seems to have evolved from the Tantric yoga of Kundalini Sadhana, which was well established in Shaiva Tantras and the teachings of ancient Shivacharyas. But over time, it gradually transformed and eventually took shape in South India as a system of mantra japa sadhana known as Śrīvidya, specifically designed for householders, both men and women in Grihastha. Now, if you think about it, the original Tantric yoga, cleansing the nadis, opening the chakras and awakening Kundalini Shakti, was probably never meant for family life. These practices demand intense physical and mental discipline, something only dedicated yogis could truly commit to. So it is quite likely that over time the system was adapted to be more accessible, making it possible for even non-Vaidika householders and women to practice. After all, Tantra's core principle is inclusivity, welcoming all regardless of class or gender. And that is probably how Śrīvidya evolved into a more open and accessible sadhana system. Whether it originally developed in South India or spread there later, one thing is clear: it took on a form that allowed more people to engage in this sacred practice. We still don't have a clear picture of how Śrīvidya developed into its distinct form. However, it is unlikely that it was a direct transmission from the Tripura Krama or Śrī Krama traditions of Kashmir into South India. In fact, most early Tantric traditions that engaged from the older Tantras placed a strong emphasis on yogic practices rather than being purely ritualistic. If Śrīvidya indeed evolved from these traditions, it must have undergone a series of gradual transformations along the way. There is evidence in the works of authors like Sri Amritanandanatha and Sri Lakshmidharacharya suggesting that the more rigorous Kashmiri Tantric yoga, often referred to as Purva Kaula practices, eventually gave rise to a gentler, more accessible form of Kundalini sadhana known as Samayācāra, or more specifically Purva Samayācāra. This shift probably made the practice less strenuous while retaining its core spiritual essence. But still, it remains unclear whether householders and women were included in this version of Samayācāra as elaborated by Sri Lakshmidharacharya, or if it was moderated at all or simply transformed into another rigorous system. That too we do not know. The sacred knowledge of these Purvakaula practices was traditionally known as Kulajnana, Kuladharma, or simply Kulam. Those who adhered to and safeguarded this lineage were called Kaulas, signifying their deep connection to this esoteric tradition. This evolution from intense yogic discipline to a more adaptable sadhana system reflects Tantra's inherent flexibility, allowing the ancient wisdom to reach a broader range of seekers without losing its transformative power.
What are the original texts that establish the foundations of Śrīvidya?
We can say that the older and more fundamental text of Śrīvidya sadhana tradition is the Vamakeshwara Tantra. This text is also recognized as an authoritative scripture in the Tripura Krama of the Kashmir Shivadvaita philosophy, and this work is more commonly known as Nitya Shodashikarnavam. The first 5 chapters, Adhyayas of Nitya Shodashikarnavam, deal with ritualistic procedures. The next 3 chapters, comprising nearly 400 verses, elaborate on the philosophical and doctrinal aspects of Śrīvidya. These last or the final 3 chapters are known by the name Yogini Hridayam. This section, which forms a part of the Vamakeshwara Tantra, serves as an earlier and foundational text that elucidates the philosophical and doctrinal dimensions of Sri Chakra, Sri Chakra Puja, and Śrīvidyopāsanā. For the ritualistic worship practices known as Saparya Vidhis in Śrīvidya, encompassing puja, homa, and other associated rites, the authoritative texts include works such as the Parashurama Kalpasutra, Śrīvidyārnava Tantra, and the Tripurārnava Tantra. However, in South India, the Parashurama Kalpasutra gained greater prominence. And Parashurama Kalpasutra is generally believed to have been composed in these parts. The Parashurama Kalpasutra serves virtually as a digest of Śrīvidyopāsanā system. It can be said that with the introduction of the Parashurama Kalpasutra, the structure for the ritualistic worship of Sri Chakra got established. That is, as the ritual-based principal external practice, Bhāhyānusthāna, within the fully developed Śrīvidya tradition. We can also see a great leap, or rather a quantum jump, made in the Parashurama Kalpasutra towards a form of worship more aligned with the Vaidika system than the Tantrika system. In the sutra itself, we find the introduction of many Vedic mantras. To give you an example, the 31st sutra in the 3rd part of Parashurama Kalpasutra reads like this: Tad bindubhihi Trishaha Shirasi Gurupadagam Ishtva Ardram Jalati Jyotirahamasmi Jyotirjjalati Brahmahamasmi Yohamasmi Brahmahamasmi Ahamasmi Brahmahamasmi Ahamevaham Mam Juhomi Swaheti Tad Bindum Atmanah Kundalinyam Juhoyat. Which means, having worshipped the revered Guru's Padagas, that is the sacred sandals on the head thrice, with that Bindu, one should offer that bindu into one's own kundalini by chanting Ardram Jalati Jyotirahamasmi. That is, the radiant light shines, moist and blazing. I am that light. The light shines. I am Brahman. I am that which I am, and indeed Brahman myself. I offer myself as an oblation into myself, Swaha. Like this. This Ardram Jalati Jyotirahamasmi mantra is from Taittiriya Aranyakam, and it also comes in Mahanarayanopanishad. I mentioned this just for an example. Since the Parashurama Kalpasutra is composed in the sutra style, concise and aphoristic format, Sri Umanandanatha, a disciple of the famous Sri Bhaskararaya, compiled an explanatory text titled Nityotsava Paddhati in AD 1775, summarizing the ritualistic procedures prescribed in the Parashurama Kalpasutra. However, a later scholar, Sri Rameshwara Suri, who was another disciple of Sri Bhaskararaya, felt that Nityotsava failed to represent the true meaning of the Parashurama Kalpasutra. So, consequently, in the year AD 1831, Sri Rameshwara Suri wrote a detailed gloss, vritti, elaborating on each sutra of the Parashurama Kalpasutra, interpreting all predominantly tantric content through a Vedic lens. I shall just quote one statement by Sri Rameshwara Suri while commenting on the first sutra. Sarvatantranam Vedabhahyatvam Shanka Nirasah. That is, the doubt that all tantras are outside the Vedic authority is refuted. Thus, he boldly asserts that all tantras are included within the Vedic corpus and are not separate from it. While Śrīvidyopāsanā originated from Shrikrama or Tripura Krama, which in turn has its roots in Shaiva Tantras, it was initially a purely tantric mode of worship. However, through meticulous reasoning and scriptural substantiation, Sri Rameshwara Suri refutes the notion that tantras are non-Vedic or opposed to the Vedas. Instead, he upholds the legitimacy within the Vedic framework. One of the fundamental proofs he presents is the rejection of the claim that tantras are exclusively meant for those who are Shruti Patha Galitaha, those who have fallen away from the Vedic path. He clarifies this by distinguishing the specific usage of Tantra in certain contexts as referring to particular traditions such as the Shaiva Agamas. Shrutipatha Galitanam iti Sudagita Vachanam Tatratyam Tantrapadam Tantra Vishesham Tacha Tantram Shaivagama iti Prasiddham. That is, the phrase Shrutipatha Galitanam in the Sutta Samhita refers specifically to a particular Tantra, and that Tantra is well known as the Shaiva Agamas. So, this statement reinforces that the exclusion of certain tantric traditions from the Vedic fold is not a wholesale rejection of Tantra itself, but applies only to specific non-Śrīvidya related traditions. Further, he cites authoritative texts such as Agastya Samhita to show that sectarian tantric traditions like Pashupata, Kapalika and Kalamukha have restrictions on Vaidikas practicing them. Pashupate cha Kapale tatha Kalamukhaishu cha Adhikaro Vaidikanam nasti munishwaraha. In the Pashupata, Kapalika and Kalamukha traditions, Vaidikas have no authorities, none whatsoever, O sages. That is the meaning of this verse. However, this restrictions does not extend to Śrīvidya, which remains fully accessible to Vaidikas. Thus, Rather than being excluded from the Tantric practices, Vaidikas are affirmed to have full access to Śrīvidyopāsanā within the Vedic tradition. Sri Rameshwara Suri conclusively establishes that Śrīvidya, far from being non-Vedic, is an integral part of the Vedic tradition, deeply rooted in both Shruti and Smriti. Today, in South India, Nityotsava, along with its explanation regarding puja procedures, has been widely accepted as the primary authoritative interpretation of the text. Many Guru Mandalas have also developed their own procedural structures for Sri Chakra Navavarana Puja based on this work. These tracts or guidebooks are widely followed and hold authoritative status within the respective lineages of those Guru Mandalas. A few additional rigs from Rigveda or other Vedic mantras have also been incorporated into these procedures to align Sri Chakra Navavarana Puja with a more Vedic style of worship. Now, is Śrīvidya something that was filtered out from Kashmira Shrikrama and developed into a distinct path of sadhana? We cannot entirely deny that possibility either. We also do not know whether there were other foundational texts that established the authority of Śrīvidya. Because in these matters of a transcendental nature, it is the tradition handed down from masters to disciples that governs actual practice. When it comes to Upasana, the transmission through the Guru Parampara, from Guru to Sishya, is the highest authority. Therefore, it is also difficult for us to definitely state which Guru Paramparas have evolved based on which foundational texts and how each of them has developed over time.
So I have this question based on my limited understanding of Śrīvidya, which is that is what we have today as Śrīvidyopāsanā entirely based on the Vedic system, because it has so many Vedic mantras. Could you throw some light on this?
No. As I mentioned earlier, the Parashurama Kalpasutra, with its foundation in Vedic influence, is an authoritative text only for the ritualistic worship of Śrīvidya, such as puja, homa, and other saparya vidhis of many deities associated with Śrīvidyopāsanā. This form of worship is known as Bahya Aradhana or external worship. However, even more profound and essential is Antara Upasana, the inner practice or inward oriented practice, which primarily consists of mantra japa. The method and rules for this are not codified in texts but are transmitted directly from guru to disciple. This is where the significance of the dictum Guru Upadishta Margenaiva Pramanam Japah becomes truly relevant. It affirms that japa is authoritative only when practiced according to the method prescribed by the guru, one's own guru. So, due to the absence of a well-defined manual, the correct methodology of mantra japa has, over time, been lost in transmission. In many cases, it has been reduced to a mere routine anusthana, a routine act of rolling the japamala and mechanically completing the prescribed count, rather than engaging in japa with the depth of awareness and discipline it requires. But valuable hints and clues regarding the correct approach to japa can be found in many tantras and in the guidance indicated in the writings of revered acharyas. And these insights have been rightly interpreted and faithfully preserved in various traditions, even today also.
Could you shed some more light on the phase of Tantra's evolution, specifically before Śrīvidya emerges as a form of Shakti sadhana, from the perspective of Tripurakrama?
The evolution of Śrīvidya, whether it originated from Sri Krama or Tripurakrama, remains an open question. It has taken a firm root in South India now as a more structured system of worship under the name Śrīvidya. However, the precise trajectory, the route map, so to speak, of the various phases this worship tradition passed through before attaining its full establishment remains unclear even today. It appears that several links in this historical chain have faded into obscurity. What we can deduce is primarily based on our insights and observations from the writings of various acharyas. In ancient times, certain Kalikrama practices known as Kula or Kula Sadhana were already in existence either alongside or even before the emergence of Tripurakrama. Some Tantric works describe these early spiritual practices as having four essential divisions: Vidya, Kriya, Charya, and Yoga. These divisions were often categorized further into two, that is, Charya Pada and Yoga Pada, depending on whether they were intended for worship or spiritual attainment. In any tantric practice, initiation, that is, Dīkṣā, is considered a fundamental necessity. There is every possibility to believe that in earlier times, most Hindu householders in our country, probably mostly from the upper castes, underwent Dīkṣā, that is, initiation, in some form based on their respective family or caste traditions, like the Upanayana ceremony of Brahmins. This does not necessarily mean that all initiations were tantric, but rather that initiation into some form of religious ritual, some method of upasana, was likely a common practice across India. I mean, in ancient days. At the same time, the tantric path seems to have evolved with its own distinct flavor, incorporating more symbolic, internalized, and highly ritualistic elements. Core aspects such as Bhuta Shuddhi, that is, purification of elements, and Nyasa, which means ritual placement of divine energies over the body parts, were likely introduced in the earliest stages of this development. Over time, these became integral to the tantric mode of practice. Further advancements, including the incorporation of the Panchamakaras, served as a means to test a practitioner's self-control and ability to withstand sensory temptations. You know what is Panchamakara? The 5 ritual substances, that is Madhya, Mamsa, Matsya, Mudra, and Maithuna, meaning wine, meat, fish, some type of grains or cooked food containing intoxicating substance, and ritual intercourse. Unfortunately, the Panchamakara sadhana has often been grossly misunderstood or perhaps not understood at all. For a chaste sadhaka who has committed to a sattvic path of pure vegetarianism, the practice of Panchamakara sadhana, that is, eating matsya and mamsa, drinking madhya, and consuming mudra, some grain mixed with intoxicating substances, are truly very challenging. And the last of the Panchamakaras, that is engaging in sexual intercourse, Maithuna, without being drawn in by the sensory pulls, without being overtaken by the impulses of the senses, would be an immense ordeal, one which he must withstand and transcend successfully. It is like an Agni Pariksha, an ordeal by fire. Only a Veera Sadhaka, one who is courageous, steadfast, and has transcended the cravings of the senses, can endure such profound trials on the path of spiritual transformation. The Kularnava Tantra says, Yaireva patanam dravyaihi siddhis taireva chodita. That which causes one's downfall can also become the very means of one's spiritual accomplishment. And also, for aspirants with intense yearning for liberation, mumukshutva, Tantric yoga centered around Kundalini awakening became an integral part of their practice. However, this path required extreme physical discipline and vairagya, that is detachment. And therefore it is doubtful if this Tantric yoga was ever practiced by householder aspirants. So these Tantric spiritual sadhakas who focused on their spiritual upliftment through the two paths of Charya and Yoga came to be known as Kaulas. And in its earliest form, Kaula sadhana emphasized intense and transgressive practices as methods to transcend duality and achieve direct spiritual realization by breaking conventional social and religious restrictions. How did this word Kaula come into use? Sri Amrutanandanatha, in his commentary on Yogini Hridaya, explains, Kulam shariram mahaprayojana hetutaya yesham te kaulaha. Kula refers to the body. Those who make it a highly effective means for liberation are known as Kaulas or Kaulas as pronounced in southern parts. Thus the term Kula represents a broader concept encompassing fundamental tantric principles. So, from this we can infer that Tantra sadhana broadly evolved into two distinct paths. Charya sadhana, emphasizing external rituals, including practices such as the use of panchamakaras, aimed at disciplining the mind and progressing in upasana, and yoga sadhana, which focused on internal worship where the awakened Kundalini is revered as the Supreme Shakti. These two paths coexisted, shaping a diverse and profound spiritual tradition. It is probable that they were also adopted into the Shakti sadhana that came to be known as Tripura Krama, which later influenced the formation of the Upasana Krama of Śrīvidya system. Let me remind you again, all these are merely inferences based on certain remarks and statements found in the commentaries of well-known teachers.